I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition. With 33% of workers gone after COVID, the landscape of leadership is facing unprecedented challenges. In this new reality, the true measure of a leader's effectiveness lies in the number of promotable individuals on their team. Leadership is only effective if it inspires followership. And this is more crucial than ever in navigating the complexities of change management. Real change only occurs when we address the root of the issue, mindset. Transforming mindsets is the key to driving meaningful, sustainable change within organizations. This was the subject of my next interview on the Business of Intuition. Her name is Wendi Swanson, and we just had a fantastic conversation. A little bit about Wendi. Wendi is a internationally recognized strategic leadership consultant, facilitator, and program developer with a focus on unleashing the heartbeat of every organization, i.e., its people. Through authenticity and intentionality, Wendi encourages a human-centered approach to growth, dials down on change systems, and redefines what it means to be a leader. For over 2 decades, she has worked with executive leaders to develop high potential teams and organizational growth strategy. Wendi also gets to the heart of change by working directly with management and frontline people to create growth at all levels of the organization. And as a sought after expert, Wendi gets to the root cause of what's holding a team back and creates a model for change. She has facilitated workshops using simultaneous translation in Russian, French, and Spanish, and has worked with companies in Russia, Canada, and Mexico, Argentina, Korea, and the United States. She develops workshops on talent acquisition and development, performance management, organizational and individual growth, and leadership for mid to large size companies across the globe. Wendi Swanson on the Business of Intuition. Wendi, it is a real pleasure to get to know you here on the Business of Intuition. And I was just thinking about that. My wife and I, who is also part of the team, just came back from Boston. This is we're in May of 2024. So
already,
already. How did that happen? But we went to this conference that was called Coaching for Leadership in Healthcare. So it was both for coaching for leadership and coaching for healthcare. And it was put on by the Institute for Coaching, and it took place at Harvard. And it was a tremendous event. And there's a lot of great things happening. What I really got out of all this is that leadership is definitely evolving and changing as the market is, as AI is causing us to, as the speed of change right now is so fast. It's an incredible, unprecedented change. And I came away with a lot of great ideas, but I was definitely came away with just the reminder of that leadership is not a stagnant competency set. It is a ever evolving set of things that change over time. So what's your take on where we are right now on this large topic of leadership? How is it different? What are the new strains? What are the new opportunities that leaders who may be listening should be aware of?
Yeah. So, Dean, a lot of the work that I do is in retail, although I have done some work in nonprofits and law enforcement and a little bit in insurance. All of the industries that I work with are all people focused. So I'm all about the customer experience and then also the internal employee experience. So that's really where I stay. And now more than ever, and you know this as much as I do, our greatest challenge, regardless of industry, is the labor force.
Yeah.
After COVID, there is this, and I've seen all kinds of different statistics, as I'm sure you have. The latest statistic I saw is we have 33% less people in the market.
Than when?
than before COVID.
Prior to COVID.
They never came back.
So is that because they just opted out of the labor force? Is it because they are now into retirement age? Because a lot of baby boomers are now at that age.
That's right.
And so now they're almost, well, maybe because of age and health, they're forced out. Which is that? That's a interesting and yet scary statistic around
That's
that,
right.
you know, and I'm assured that we don't have 33% less jobs. We
That's
still
right.
have the same number of jobs. And maybe in some cases, one could say maybe we do and maybe we don't, depending upon the industry. Certainly with AI coming on board and so forth, one could say that's the case. But what? Tell us more about that stat. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. A large portion of that we know are people who have retired. Another portion of that is during COVID. You know, one of my favorite things is that through adversity comes innovation. And so you think about the innovation that happened during COVID, and people are now being influencers like we haven't seen before. And they're staying home and they're actually making money from home. I think some people realized, wow, you know what? I have 3 friends out of my friend group that are now doing medical billing, medical pre-work, medical certification, and they're staying at home. And so we got really creative and we realized we don't really have to go to an office. We don't really have to pay for an office. So, you know, I think between retirement, I think the innovation that happened, I think, you know, it has forced organizations to say, wow, do we really have to come to an office? Could we do some kind of a hybrid model? And as I said, I work with a lot of retailers. And so my poor retailers are going, wait a minute, you know, there are the industries that we can't do a hybrid model. You know, I need people to actually come to the store. I work in a hotel. You know, I need people to actually come to work. You know, airlines, I need people to, you know, flight attendants and pilots. There are some jobs that can't be done hybrid. And so we've got this mentality in this labor force post-COVID that goes, well, I could actually work from home. And yet there's this tremendous number of organizations that can't offer that. And so it is forcing this change that I think, especially for retailers and hospitality and restaurants, we just weren't ready for. And so this mind shift that has to happen, I think is pretty overwhelming for people who are leading these organizations that actually have brick and mortar locations.
Well, let's talk about mind shift in a second, because I think that's going to be an area that we're going to land on here before too long, because that seems to be the engine of all this change is our mental models by which we subscribe to. But let's go back a second, because this whole hybrid model that you talked about, and which has been talked about a lot, obviously, that really was brought upon us because of COVID and the forced isolations that we had to be a part of. I'm sensing that there is still a lot of consternation around leadership and maintaining a culture in a hybrid environment, whereby we've got sort of the jury is still out. Do we need to bring people back to work? Because one, you know, we're paying for real estate. We might as well use it. Right.
Right.
And maybe even our renter of our property is giving us some great deals because they want to make sure that they don't lose their property. Right. But also, we see that we have certain, you know, people within certain types of functions, like we really, from an individual perspective, IT or call center, we don't need them to come to work. You know, they can be in their pajamas with their big fluffy, you know, slippers on and doing their work from home. They can do it that way. But then there becomes this whole area of, one, how do we lead people who are at work and who are not at work simultaneously? And then two, what's the value of culture in this whole algorithm, and how important is culture when it comes to things like retention and productivity and healthcare and, you know, best places to work and all the things that we seem to say are important. What's your sense about that?
Yeah. Oh, big question.
Oh, yeah. Let's buckle up.
So I did an experiment. So I'm going to answer your question with a analogy that I personally have just been through so much change since COVID. You know, I'm used to jumping on an airplane every single Monday and coming home on a Friday and live facilitation and, you know, changing culture in a 4 to 8 month process that I walk managers and leaders through. And I was in the middle of, so I had just done a pilot in Canada with a wireless organization there. They have over 300 stores that are corporate stores, and then they also have their manufacturer stores. And we had done a great pilot, super exciting. Now we're ready to roll it out into the rest of the organization in March of 2020. And I was basically going to live in Canada because I was going to be going to 5 provinces in Canada and, doing one city and moving to the next. And so my executive sponsor, Bruce Herskovitchy, said, Wendi, they're not going to open the borders again. We have got to figure out how to do this virtually. And I said, Bruce, there is no physical way that I can change culture and implement these new systems virtually. Can't do it. Well, as we all know, borders weren't opening back up. And so, again, with adversity comes innovation. I got a group of phenomenal people together, and we completely redefined how we implement and how we drive culture virtually. And long story short, a year later, in March of 2021, we were able to do 8-month process with them, walk them through all 386 stores. We did over 152 5-hour virtual sessions and got better results than we got in the pilot.
The pilot was a live session?
So virtual sessions just like this, where I had 30 people on for 5 hours.
Yeah, got it. 5 hours on a Zoom call.
Correct. With a couple little breaks in between. So what did I get to learn to do? We did a virtual bingo where, you would every participant would have a bingo card in front of them. And when there was a cat that meowed, somebody who said, that they were on mute. So we're saying, YOM, you're on mute. We got to have some really fun things. All these things are on their bingo cards. We would plant somebody walking behind me. So anybody who saw somebody walking behind me, they got the bingo. I mean, we had so much fun figuring out how in the world do we keep people engaged for 5 hours. We had breaks in between. So it ended up to be probably 4 hours with the breaks, and putting people into breakout rooms and having breakout leaders and assigning them to come back and report. Everybody's on video. And I will tell you, I learned more about facilitation because how to be intentional on a Zoom call. And, when I'm in a room and I have 100 people in a room, I know somebody who's not buying in the back room, and I go right to their table and I can see what's happening. I can sit down on breaks. You don't have that on Zoom.
Right.
So, we got really creative. We got really good at learning what the learning signals were in a virtual setting. We did some great follow-up with their leaders to actually go back and answer questions afterwards. We got really good at how to raise your hand and get to the front screen, and all of that to say, I do think I proved myself wrong that there's a lot that can be done virtually in terms of culture, in terms of productivity. Do I believe that model is sustainable over time in most situations where I am part of a team? I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think this will never replace the eye-to-eye, face-to-face being a part of a team.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that I was thinking as you were talking, is that we went through a similar kind of transformation of having to do a lot of virtual facilitations when normally I would have been on a plane going there live. And so we learned a lot like you did. And yet the research that I keep hearing around loneliness and separation and depression and suicide rates and divorce rates, all the other rather difficult stats relative to mental health seems to say that we are hungry for meaningful human connection, that we have not had as much of, or we don't get the same full potency on a two-dimensional screen. Right. And, it's an interesting sort of existential conversation, which maybe we're all sort of having, during our own cocktail parties with our friends, is that with AI becoming more and more prevalent and sophisticated at a miraculous speed.
That's right.
That are we now slowly shifting the collective expectation away from human contact to a facsimile that we then become comfortable with. It's like, at one point one could say that we were, as a species, we just took for granted certain things like going for a walk in the forest, right? I mean, hundreds of years ago. And we could say now, yeah, that's wonderful. We would love to do that. We experience it. We feel rejuvenated by that experience, but we no longer expect it. We no longer have the something that we need to have because we've become so socialized and conditioned that living in our houses in the cities and even in virtual environments is now the new norm. And so we don't really desire the old norm, and unless, of course, we go on vacation, we experience it. I'm wondering if existentially, if we're slowly moving our collective consciousness away from human connection. Is that a depressing thought? All right.
No, and I'm trying to decide where to go here. I will tell you, though, that, and it's my personal belief, I don't have proof behind this. I would love to talk to a behavioral scientist about it and see if it can be proven. I just believe that human beings were created for connection. And I think regardless of how far we go with technology, there is always going to be a rubber band effect to come back to how we were created. And I believe that we were created for relationship. And I think we crave that. And I think that is a big part of where we are today, that exactly as you said, boy, our depression rates are, I think about my son as a baseball player. He's now 24 years old and almost went pro, but graduated from college last year. And, when he came home and he didn't have his team and, they weren't playing their last games. And then, they got a whole extra year, a COVID year, which was actually ended up to be a blessing. I have never seen those kids it was like a magnet, they're on the phone, they're actually talking, they're actually picking up the phone and, because they needed their people, they needed their teams. Yeah. And I just think we're going to come back to that. I really do.
And I think that there is a kind of a constant sort of balance that happens, in social dynamics. You introduce one thing, there's something else that sort of balances it out. So while at one hand, we've got this isolation, depression, AI-induced sort of disconnection from people, all that's true. And it gets a lot of face time, gets a lot of airtime. And on the other hand, there's ground swelling movements around people rediscovering themselves, their purpose, their connection to nature and their health and their relationships with people. And that is also happening. It just doesn't get the ticker that we see on our computers.
That's right.
Because it's not, a publicly traded movement, right? These are ground swelling kinds of things that are happening all over the place. So I don't think we should ever lose that knowledge that the media likes to put the emphasis on one thing, but there's a lot going on that is counterbalancing what it is we're talking about.
Well, and Dean, you were leading us right back to where we started, and that is leadership. So what I am seeing out there is, it is so unfortunate. One of the exercises that I do, either virtually or live, when I'm doing leadership work, is I have people write down before we even get started. So name someone in your life who you have wanted to follow, who you were inspired to follow. Sounds pretty basic, right?
Right.
There are so many people. I'll have 50 people in a room and I've got 10 people staring at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Who is that?
And it's so sad.
Yeah.
And so, eventually they get to the point where they have a name of a coach or even a piano teacher. I have one girl that's like, wow, I never really thought about that, but she really inspired me. Right. And so as they go through the workshop, they're usually able to at least identify one. There is a fact that as human beings, we want to be seen, we want to be known, and we want to be heard. And so when I ask them, why did you write that name down? That is what I hear is, number one, they were trustworthy, they had integrity, they saw me, they knew me, they invested in me. And so when I talk about leadership and inspiration and impact, as well as influence, the 3 I's, as part of intuitive leadership, taking the time to invest in people. And as we experience that, we want to give that back. And so with AI, with technology, with all of this that is going on, there is still this desire, and this has been proven over and over, to be known, to be seen, and to be a part of something big. And so as we continue through this change, the leaders who really step up and continue to be intentional about seeing people, about investing in people, creating impact through their influence and inspiration, that's what's going to make a difference in culture, in productivity, in anywhere that we go in this ever-changing landscape, is those few people who are choosing to invest in people. And I think we're hungry for it.
I think that's a really great distinction. It reminds me of that old definition about what's the definition between management and leadership, and
Right.
Management could be like sort of managing activities and outputs and time schedules and tasks. But leadership, to your point, in a nutshell, is around managing relationships and connection and
That's
all
right.
the things that we are saying that we are sort of lacking right now because of the isolation and all the things we just described. Leadership is, in a sense, based on what you said, tell me if I'm wrong, is sort of the antidote for that, is the solution to that, that we need
right.
leadership now maybe more than ever because of the fact that we're so disconnected. We feel
Yes.
so lonely. We feel so isolated. What's the solution? Stronger leadership.
That's right.
Well,
And the
there you
good
go.
news is, leadership can be learned,
Right.
right? And the bad news is leadership can be learned.
Yeah, right.
It's about being intentional, right?
Right.
And I have all these stories, but I think
I know
that
so those of you who don't know, she's like, her hands are going all over the place and she's jumping
can't
up and
stand
down.
still.
She can't stand still. I can't even see her anymore. It's just like this blur of movement going back and forth.
Oh, I get so excited about this because that's why we do what we do, right? Creating impact, creating change, making people, who want to be better. I love that we're now having EI conversations, and emotional intelligence has become part of this because it's so much different than intellect that's, static, whereas emotional intelligence, we can learn and we can be better at communication. We can be better at our self-awareness. And I was teaching a management workshop with Liquor Stores North America in Edmonton, Alberta, one of my favorite clients, of course. I got to taste all their fabulous wines that were just coming out. It was just terrible. I just hated it, Dean. It was awful. But I had this one manager, and it was our first workshop over 4 workshops over 4 months. And, I start talking about management and leadership and all the things that you and I are talking about. And her name is Justine. And Justine, if you're listening, you still inspire me. And she came to me on the first break of the first day and handed me her management binder and said, I can't do this. This is way over my head. I don't have a college degree. And I was actually put in this position, not because I wanted it, but because there was no one else. And I had the tenure. And I just, leading people, this is not my thing. I could do inventory. I can do all that. This is not me. I said, Justine, that's why we're doing this. Please stick with it. And by the end of 4 months, you're going to have exactly what you need to be able to manage and lead. So just stick with it. So the next workshop, we always have managers, present in front of their teams. What were their results? And, there's a group of executives in the back. And I mean, it's an intimidating thing. And the number one fear in the world is public speaking. And so for the Justines of the world, this is one of the hardest things they might ever do in their life. She came back to the second workshop. We got her a chair. I stood up with her just so that I was right there with her, because I have had people almost pass out when they do this, because it is not easy. We push them way out of their comfort zone. And afterwards, they always are like, so we got her through it. It was awesome. She went to the second meeting. Dean, she came to the third meeting, and I will remember this for the rest of my life. She came in like a new woman. I'm like, who are you? And what have you done with Justine? She had her Michael Kors bag on, and she's walking in. She comes right up to me. She goes, Wendi, you're not going to believe it. My store hit target for the first time. What's going on? She's like, just trust in the process. And by the fourth meeting, she got up and she did this presentation that was one of the best I've seen. She's got all kinds of confidence. And she goes, Wendi, here's the thing. Do you remember in the first meeting when you told us about John Maxwell? And he said, at some point in your life, just take a walk and stop and look behind you. And is anybody following you? Well, guess what? After the last meeting, I was walking back to the washroom and I stopped and I looked back and my team is following me to the back room. And Wendi, I am a leader and I'm just tears, just sobbing. Because number one, she was a learner and she chose to get better at her communication, to get better at how she analyzed results, to invest in her people. And that's what I love about leadership is it is a choice. If someone is a learner and they are intentional, they're going to get better. Therefore, the people around them are going to get better. And that's one of my questions that people ask all the time. Well, can you really measure leadership? Yes, you can measure leadership. It's called followership. By your intentionality and your impact and your care about people, when you see them, when you hear them, and you invest in them, they want to follow. And so now more than ever, there is this need for intentionality around leadership. Because there's very few people, I don't know about you, there's not a lot of people out there that I want to follow. And so there's those very few that are investing and are learners and are wanting to create impact. I want to be a part of that.
That's very inspiring. I love the idea that the way you know that you're a leader is that you have followers. And we don't necessarily have a good way of being able to measure that. I mean, how do you know whether you have followers?
Oh,
You know, I mean, true followers, not, okay, I got to because you're my boss and I've been told and the org structure says I'm supposed to follow you, but hearts and minds followership, not followership out of fear, followership out of a genuine desire to be able to align to somebody whose vision you respect and you want to go after with.
Yeah, Dean,
that's great.
I have a metric around that. One of the metrics that I look at in leadership is the percentage of people a leader has that are promotable.
It's a great one. Yeah. That are promotable. Yeah.
Not that there's a position available to be promotable.
Right.
Could they?
Right.
Which, dovetails into when you look at an effective leader, obviously we know that intuitively productivity goes up. We also know that employee engagement scores go up. And also employee evaluations. When you compare department to department, all of those things over time as the leader gets better, those also get better, which to me, that's the biggest differentiator between management and leadership. Management is I follow because it's my job or I have to versus leadership, I want to. And when you have a team of people who have that high want to, it becomes much more about collaboration and innovation than just simply doing the job. So they perform at a higher level.
Right.
Pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. It's really good. So tell me briefly about your perspective on change, and maybe we'll bring you back for another conversation if it's really needs a lot of exploration. But the leaders obviously are in a ecosystem of constant change. And your point is very well taken that one way to measure leadership is the percentage of people that are promotable, that are quote unquote under you. But again, we're still circling this orbit of change all the time. And yet, and leaders need to adapt to and help people through their own change process. Because if they don't stay the same, they're not going to be promotable and there is nothing to really lead. So change is sort of the commonality here. So tell us a little bit about your perspective on how leaders can manage and move people through change.
Yeah. One of my favorite questions. So when I'm working with a client, one of the things that I'll do is I'll go in and I'll observe coaching, because I think coaching is one of the most misunderstood leadership roles or responsibilities. And I also think it's one of the most intimidating. It's not easy to be a good coach. And so one of the things I'll do is I'll observe coaching. And especially in a retail environment where you have people, the majority of people in retail, I don't know a lot of people at 15 years old that were like, oh yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a retail salesperson. It's just, so, most people retail is a place that they go when they're going somewhere else. And so I will listen to managers who have been brought up through the ranks. Most of them started as sales and they've been promoted in a lot of situations with very little training. And one of the most common things I hear on a retail selling floor is, hey, Dean, sell more. Okay. I go to the back room and I look to see if their targets are posted. And sure enough, their targets and goals are posted. And I go to that individual that was just told to sell more. And I go, do you know what you need to sell this week? Yep. Here's how much I need to sell. Do you know how close you are to getting there? Yep, I do. And by simply telling someone to do more, sell more, that actually negatively affects morale. And that is absolutely not coaching. That's information. That is not feedback. And do you think that they know or do you think that they know that they need to sell more? Absolutely. So just by you saying, hey, sell more, it actually deflates them versus lifts them up.
Right.
So, in terms of leadership, how do we manage change? How do we lead change? It goes beyond, hey, do more, sell more, be better. We've got to be able to get down to the behaviors that are causing people not to succeed and go to the next level. And that is get to their mindset. Why are they not doing their behaviors? Is that a training issue? Is it a willingness issue? Is it I just have a lack of understanding issue? Why is it they're not doing it? Because every single organization will have something, and you know this, Dean, as well as I do. They will have certain things that their teams or individuals are not doing. Well, why aren't they doing it? And we just need to go, hey, do it better. I just don't believe that people wake up in the morning wanting to suck. Right? So, if somebody shows up and they're not succeeding, to just tell them to do better. If they knew what to do, they would do it. And so I think the biggest thing behind change leadership is getting to the why and getting to the root, which requires getting to a belief system. What does that person believe about what it is that I am asking them to do? What does that person believe about potential blind spots that are preventing them from doing what it is that they need to do? I think that the greatest thing to change leadership is those leaders that are willing to listen and are willing to take the time to get to the bottom of performance problems or challenges versus just everybody work like a team. Come on, let's just work harder. Let's just sell more. Let's get to the root of it. And let's stop just looking at outcomes. Let's take that from outcomes to behaviors, to mindset, to belief systems. Because at the end of the day, belief systems is going to be the secret to sustainability and changing specific behaviors and landscapes and approaches towards strategy. So huge explanation.
Totally. I get it conceptually, and I want to bring it home for people.
Okay.
All right. Let's say I'm working at a shop. I'm actually thinking about a good friend of mine who actually has a shop that sells things. And I'm being told that I need to sell more. That's to your point, right? Give me an example where there is the gap. What's the mindset or the behaviors that is preventing that individual from going from where they are now to where they need to be with respect to sales? Because of course the sales is the measurement that we're going for. The mindset is the process. The behaviors is the process to get there. So bring it home. Give me a scenario by which that person might be blocked because of a mindset or because of a behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Thanks for that opportunity to give the example, because I think that really helps to anchor it in. I was working with a wireless company that I mentioned a little bit earlier in Canada. And one of the things with wireless is, when you're buying a new phone, you're always going to be offered protection for that phone. And I don't know, Dean, if you've ever actually dropped a phone and you didn't have protection and had to pay the $1,800. Yeah, I had just bought a brand new phone and I'm running and it fell out of my pocket. And I was sad that I had not gotten the screen protector and the protection. It's a better customer experience to at least offer it to that customer than to have them to not offer it and then to have it break and then they're mad at us, right? If they refuse it, that's one thing. If they were never offered it, then that's on the retailer. So their protection numbers on new devices, they were at 50% to target. They weren't anywhere where they needed to be in terms of that. It's called an attachment rate. And so as I sat down and I started doing interviews, I asked the people who were not hitting their targets, why are you not hitting it? And what do you think the number one reason was? They don't believe in it. They believe it's snake oil. They personally would not put protection on their phone. So guess what? They're not going to offer it to a customer because they don't believe that it's value. They believe it's pushy, aggressive, and obnoxious. So the first time that actually changes, so they could know, here's what my target is. I need to be at 100% to target. From an outcome perspective, they know the behaviors. The behaviors are you tie the customer said that they travel a lot. So you tie they're on the run a lot to a value statement of why they would need protection on their phone. So, the individual may know how to do that. They may know their target. Their mindset, though, is I will do it when my manager is watching. I don't believe in it. Therefore, I'm not going to do it.
Are you
So their
saying
mindset
that
is
you need to be able to work with the individual on believing the product by which they are trying to sell?
That's right.
And what happens if, because I was in the same boat, like many, many years ago before I started this business, I actually was a manager for an inbound telemarketing company. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my coaching with the people who are on the floor, but we ended up breaking all these records.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether or not they broke the records because of my support of them and my belief in them and creating a fun environment, or whether they really believed in these protection plans, which is really what we were doing more than anything, right? Was selling them stuff beyond the computer. It was the protection plan. So is that the key in your analogy, is that we need to get people to believe in what it is they're selling? Or is it that we need to be better at the technique, aligning the item to something that the customer values?
It's both. The answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
So, one of the most common questions I get is, okay, Wendi, I get that conceptually. How do I change belief? Because if I don't believe in protection plans, I don't believe in protection plans. How you change belief is through experience. So the first time a sales associate experiences a customer that comes back and broke their phone and they said yes to the protection and they're super happy and grateful that it was offered, it's like, oh. Or the negative experience of they come in, it wasn't offered, and now they're mad at us.
Right.
And it's now on me because I didn't offer it. So as they have those experiences, and maybe it's not their experience, it can be the experience of a fellow associate or the experience of a manager, or, hey, did you hear that customer that just walked in? That's the reality. So you're exactly right. Part of it is I change my belief through experiences, negative and positive. At the same time, if I'm an organization and what I'm offering is not value added and it truly is snake oil, that's a very different conversation. So, if I've had a customer walk in and they're one day past that value added that they bought, and therefore it's not backed up and they're mad because they paid for it, and now we're still not backing it up, that's a different conversation. It has to be something that truly is value added.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of coming away with, again, this is just a small little sliver into a much larger conversation I'm sure we get around change, is that we need to make sure that our employees, if they're certainly they have to believe in what we're doing. We gotta find a way to be able to connect people to mission.
That's right.
And what it's all about. It's funny that we just had this. I was just talking to somebody earlier today that this particular organization, I made the point that it appeared that finance, this department, was finance first, mission second. So if we can afford it, then we'll go and do it.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the organization, given what they do, was counter to that. It's mission first, and then we find out how to finance it. So there was a mismatch there. So I was providing some of the feedback around that. But nonetheless, we got to connect people to mission, whether it's selling a service plan on a phone, or whether it's a nonprofit supporting hunger in our community. That's really, really important, is to hire for mission, or at least give them some onboarding to be able to get to that. And then linking what we do to the customer around what they need and what they value, so that there is alignment there.
That's exactly right.
Telling the story.
That's right. And
telling the story.
Telling the story, connecting vision and mission to the value added services that we give. Again, we've come full circle to the difference between leadership and management, because management is just freaking do it. Do it because I told you. Do it because you're going to hit your target. Do it because versus, hey, listen, let's go back to our vision. And our vision is to make it simple for customers, to make sure that they have the best possible experience that they have. When their phone isn't protected and they drop it and they have to pay $1,800, that is not a great experience. So
Right.
let's go back to our corporate why, our vision, and how this strategy or this expectation helps us to live out our vision and mission. Because here's the thing, the customer leaves the store, they don't remember anything but you. And they define who we are based on the experience you just gave.
So, Wendy, I think that, as I wrap up this great conversation, some of the things that just stick out to me was the first thing you said is that we have 33% less people in the market than we did before.
Yeah.
That's an interesting challenge. We are really in the business of, as leaders, connecting people to mission and to values so that we have a followership, and that the best way to be able to know whether you're a good leader, one of them is, do you have people who are ready for promotion? And then you also mentioned this idea that change is really the world in which we all live in, and that leaders need to be very adept at that. And part of being able to do that is to, again, connecting people back to mission and really understanding what the mindset is, the blind spots that might be preventing people from making those changes.
That's
so
right.
Great stuff. Would you finalize this little conversation by telling people how they can follow you and learn more about what you're all about?
Yes, absolutely. So company name, my website is Edymon Group, ETYMON, edymongroup.com. And that's probably the best way to follow me on both LinkedIn and then also on my website. My email, phone number, all of that is on the website. I do post several articles on LinkedIn about all of the topics that we have talked about today.
Edymon, what is Edymon? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so Edymon, the Greek meaning is root. So I'm just really passionate about getting to the root of things. I may or may not have an etymological dictionary on my desk because I'm always about getting to the root of words.
I see.
The root of teams.
As in etymology.
Yes, exactly.
I get it. The root rod of etymology would be Edymon. I just was wondering whether that was the name of like a person or a last name, but you're going back to the root word of etymology. Wonderful. Well, Wendi, it's been great to exploring the root of leadership with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dean. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.